I'm going to be speaking today about my book, Hindu Theology and Biology. And I'm going to talk in particular about chapter 4, called The Study of Nature as Vaishnava Yoga. The specific problem that I wanted to deal with in this chapter is what exactly is the relationship between the scientific or the proto-scientific concepts in the Bhāgavata and its overarching religious goals. The Bhāgavata Purāṇa, as many of you know, is an explicitly religious book. It's aimed at bhakti, devotion. It's about the god Krishna. And it's not immediately clear why it would have such a substantial amount of information about a wide range of different kind of scientific topics. So the three things that I isolate that are, and I'm going to talk about here, that are kind of scientific in some sense, are the discussions of the virāṭ-puruṣa, or the cosmic body and all of its different components, the Sāmkhya philosophy, or cosmogony, as I call it, and the cosmology in the fifth canto. The specific questions I have that I use to kind of frame my analysis are, why do the interlocutors, or the people asking the questions in the Bhagavata's narratives, why do the interlocutors ask about cosmology and other scientific topics within the Bhagavata? Second question, what do the answers accomplish within the narrative? And third, how is cosmology said to fulfill the text's larger theological objectives? I felt if I could answer these questions that I could get a better sense of what it's doing there, what the scientific information is doing there. And if I could understand that, that would at least help understand the way that it's framed, the way that it's discussed. Because in my view, the Bhagavata is drawing from a wide range of different sources, a wide range of different topics that were in the intellectual worlds of the time, in order to make a larger point, to make a thesis. So I think the first way to kind of get at this question is near the end of the second book of the second canto is a discussion of the 10 topics of the Bhagavata. And I think right there is when you get the first very clear answer of this. Older Puranas had 5 topics. The Bhagavata has 10. 5 of them are kind of relevant to science. The first one that's relevant, Sarga, the emanation of the subtle aspects of the world from a primordial matter. Visarga, the emanation of gross matter and formation of the worlds by the gods. The Sthana, or the conservation of the universe. Uti, the causes of the creation or the emanation of the world. And Nirodha, the destruction of the cosmos. And it's very clear, the text is very clear why it includes these different topics. For example, 2.10.2 says, the great souls here in the Bhagavata describe the characteristics of the 9 topics, 5 of which I just said, for the purpose of isolating the 10th topic, which is the ultimate refuge, the ashraya, by statements from texts and by giving direct and indirect meanings. Sridhar Swami, in his commentary on this, says that the Bhagavata discusses topics related to what I've called science here, such as the emanation and destruction of the world, in order to distinguish these items from the supreme reality. So there's a sense in which the Sridhara and the Bhāgavata are saying, we're going to talk about these particular scientific topics in order to create a distinct topic related to the source or the foundation of the world. So it's immediately clear that it's got a very clear theological agenda for including these things. Okay, so the cosmic body, or the virāṭ-puruṣa. I think that this discussion probably draws a lot from yoga and from the Upanishads. This is mainly in 2.1, second book's first chapter. As many of you know, probably the yoga theory is divided into 8 topics: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharaṇā, dhyāna, and samadhi. When I went through this, the beginning portion of the second canto, I found, and I argue, that as it's discussing the virāṭ-puruṣa, the words and language that it uses, and this is made explicit by Sridhara, the words and language that it uses maps fairly clearly onto this Ashtanga yoga scheme, and it's using the same language, the same words, in order to argue that the meditation on this virāṭ-puruṣa is a kind of dharaṇā, which is the 6th step of the eightfold system, called concentration. And it very explicitly is arguing that perfection, or the ability to meditate on this virāṭ-puruṣa, is a type of dharaṇā, it's a type of concentration, and that if you get it done properly, if you do it right, then you can move to the next phase, which is dhyāna. And if you do that correctly, then you can move on to samadhi. I can read a few passages that illuminate this. As long as devotion for the Lord, who is present in the universe, who is the seer, who is the totality of matter, and from whom matter comes, is not present in one, then one should remember or meditate on, with great effort, the gross form of God after completing one's religious duties. This is from 2:14. And a similar passage is in 3:28-12. So I think what the text is saying is that as I said, that the meditation or the consideration of the God as present in the universe, which had been described, and is preliminary. And I think the reason it says this is because in the yogic scheme, dharaṇā is a concentration on some external object. It's a physical thing. It's a bija. It's something you can see with your eyes that you then internalize. And dhyāna is a more internalized and sustainable meditation. So I think that the point of the argument of this section of this chapter is that the purpose and point of the inclusion of information about the virāṭ-puruṣa is just that. It's to stabilize and create a mental condition to meditate on Vishnu in the heart, which he calls dhyāna. Okay. The cosmogony, or the sāmkhya, there's similar themes happening there as well. As you know, Sāmkhya is about how things are created out of matter, how things are created from the interaction of the Purusha and Prakriti. Here, I looked at the third canto, chapter 25, and it's framed in this discussion about Devahuti, and the whole narrative of it kind of sets the frame and purpose of why it's discussed. She's distraught. She wants some kind of knowledge that's going to help her not feel so badly. She writes, for example, "All-pervading Lord, I am extremely disgusted with the thirst for enjoying the objects of my senses. By catering to the urges of the senses, I find myself lost in the darkness of ignorance." And right after that, she's asking for instructions about Sāmkhya. So it's very explicit. The discussion of Sāmkhya is meant to elevate the mind or to clarify the mind or to relieve some kind of suffering by helping one distinguish between the difference between the self and what is not self. So this raises the obvious question, and it was entertained by scholars such as Bimal Krishnamurtilal and Karl Potter, who've kind of looked at this topic as well. And the question is, well, how exactly does that work? How is it that some kind of scientific, if you will, description of matter, how does that help one? How does that give one the kind of relief from suffering that it says it ought to? It's not exactly clear, but it could have something to do with giving the mind an analytic exercise, something to think about, to reason about as a kind of way of analyzing and evaluating life's difficulties. It could give one a conceptual understanding of how the world is mappable, or a kind of scheme of reality, and this scheme can help one navigate through problems. Those are kind of different answers that are provided, but the point of it seems clear, that the ability to comprehend, and this is 326.72, argues that the ability to comprehend the scientific, quote unquote, scientific information about the world, it prepares the mind. There's some way that it gives the mind a kind of mental stability and clarity that will allow one to do deeper forms of meditation. Okay. The fifth canto, the cosmography. This is, as many of the listeners will probably know, this is where you get the most kind of detailed description of what the text calls the bhū-maṇḍala, or the world as a kind of a bhū means being or world, and mandala is a kind of disc, or it's an object of meditation. The Bhāgavata uses this word mandala in two contexts to describe the totality of the cosmos as a mandala, as the bhū-maṇḍala, and then the rasa mandala, the circle dance of Krishna with the gopis. But it by using that word mandala, I think it immediately indicates that its description is meant to invoke this idea that it's some kind of object of meditation, contemplation, consideration. It also describes the world as the bhū-golaka, or as a circle or a globe, a sphere. It describes the world as a lotus flower, the kamala, also a classic Indian object of meditation. It also describes the world as a shishumara, or a dolphin, or a crocodile, or something like that. So the fact that you get these varied descriptions, I think, is indicating that it's not aiming directly at an objective scientific model in the same way that we might think of physical models of the universe today. It's trying to present a physical model that is also some kind of object of beauty for the purpose of consideration. And that's pretty clear again in the some of the opening passages of the most dense and thick descriptions of the cosmos. For example, at the end of Book 5, 5.16.3, Parikshita, who is the main interlocutor at this point, says, when the mind enters into the cosmic body of God, which is made of the three qualitative forces, or the gunas, it becomes able to enter into the most subtle form of God that is not made of the three qualitative forces or powers, the self-luminous Brahman named Vasudeva. Please describe this. So the word used here for enter is aveshita. Vish means enter or to pervade, and the prefix a adds a sense of emphasis. So I think this is the same theme as with Samkhya and with the virāṭ-puruṣa. There's a physical object of meditation, the visible world, in some sense visible. At least it's a model of the physical world. It's framed as an object of meditation, in this case with the fifth canto as a mandala. It's framed as an object of meditation, and it's framed as something one must learn, assimilate. The mind has to kind of enter into this understanding of it. You have to comprehend the complexity and the details of this description within your own mind. And if you're able to do that, then that prepares the mind and gives the mind the kind of mental stability and equilibrium necessary to have a meditation or contemplation on a more subtle form, something that's not physical, not immediately present before the senses, not something that's even a model of the physical world. This is how the text kind of concludes. This is in 5.26.38. This is how, when near the end of the fifth canto, how it kind of wraps up what it's done. And I think it's very important when you're reading Puranic texts, all Indian texts, maybe all texts in general, is that you can kind of get at what the author is trying to do by looking at how they start the text and how they conclude it. Maybe you look at the beginning of a chapter, at the end of a chapter, and then you can kind of scan through the text and see what kind of themes are repeated throughout the body of the text. But oftentimes an author, is true for the Indian text, the Sanskrit text, and I think many others, but they're telling you what they're trying to do at the beginning and at the end. So what does it say at the end? This is again 3.26, 38, and 39. It concludes by saying, with attention, one should recite, hear, and remember he who is to be sung about, God, the Supreme Self. Although incomprehensible, he is known by one with pure intelligence and faithful devotion. An ascetic who has controlled himself and who has heard about the gross, which is the cosmological forms, and the subtle forms, which are the forms said to be within the heart, the non-material forms within the heart. One who has heard about the gross and subtle forms of God can be gradually led from the gross to the subtle by means of a steady intellect. So it's come back to the same theme. It's the same theme with the virāṭ-puruṣa and with Samkhya. There's something mental that happens. There's a mental process, which, again, I think it maps pretty closely onto the language of the Ashtanga yoga system. That the dharaṇā on the gross leads to a dhyāna of the subtle. There's this movement, and that it is necessary to comprehend these gross physical truths in order to gain knowledge of the subtle. That's the argument of this chapter.